Hello, my name is Pete Tseronis, and I am the CEO and founder of Dots and Bridges. Today, we are going to have an awesome discussion with my colleague and friend, Mr. Eric Cole, here on the Thought Leadership Consortium. We're going to talk about a number of things that are healthcare related, analytics related, a little bit technology related, and also get to know Eric a bit in his incredible journey through the federal government, with his impact he's having in industry with the Dandy Walker Alliance, and maybe shed some light on what it is the National Institutes of Health, the National Cancer Institute, and how it all comes together, does each day of the week and twice on Sunday. So Eric, it's great to have you. I'm going to do a little bit of a background on you, but I promise I won't read your bio if you're okay with that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Pete.
You got it. You got it. So folks, again, when we do these pieces, if you're tuning in, we hope you get a few things out of today. We're going to hope to educate, inform, and enlighten. I spent 25 years in the federal government, working across a number of agencies, and really my job was to celebrate a lot of the research, the development, the folks and the individuals. And today, we're going to do just that. We hope to connect you with a little bit of, through Eric, what the healthcare sector, one of our nation's 16 critical infrastructure sectors, is all about, and his role specifically, and a bit of his background, because it's the person or the persons that make up the culture of an organization. So we hope to connect some dots and cultivate some relationship bridges, and maybe along the way create a light bulb moment or two. Eric Cole. Eric is the Deputy Executive Officer at the National Cancer Institute. And I quote, "The National Cancer Institute, one of 27 institutes and centers that make up the National Institutes of Health, which in turn is one of 11 operating divisions within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services." And that was a lot to take in, but Eric, we might need you to Sherpa us through, because the federal government is awfully large, and understanding a bit for those outside the Beltway, just how the construct of HHS is set up will be incredibly helpful. Eric, you're a technologist, you're an advisor, you founded the nonprofit Dandy Walker Alliance, you're the president of the Bethesda Community Baseball Club, you're board certified in healthcare management as an American College of Healthcare executive, well-rounded, incredibly impactful here in the government, here in the Washington, D.C. area. So again, there's more to read about. You can Google Eric Cole and check him out on LinkedIn. But Eric, I hope I did an okay job there introducing you.
Yeah, absolutely. You actually promoted me with the baseball stuff. I'm the vice president, not the president. So
forgive me. I'm gonna put that on the, well, maybe it's one day you'll be the president, right? But that's awesome. Eric, hey, I want to jump right in. I mean, seriously, was there a filler in there that you wanted to elaborate on? Just because we're going to get into those themes again, but is there something I may have left out that you wanted to just mention in terms of your passion and some of these roles that you have?
Well, I think they all sort of tie together, and I've learned at every step of the way throughout my career and different experiences with different business opportunities, that you can take the lessons that you learn from each of those and apply them to the various facets of life that we all operate on. So everybody is complex, and nobody sort of lives in just one silo. There's many things that influence them. And so I think there's great opportunity to take something from all those different sort of circles that we run in and see where they might be applicable in the other arenas.
Well, well stated, and I appreciate that, because that's really what we want to do, is weave a bit of a tapestry here on your journey and some of the stops you've had along the way, and where you are today and where you're going. So as we talked in our pre-call, we're going to kind of roll with this. It's a conversation, my friend. Let's talk a little bit, though, about the here and now. And folks, I'm going to blend in a bit about Eric and his background that I know about him in terms of being one savvy technology evangelist, ambassador, and practitioner. The guy's knows cybersecurity inside and out, but now he gets to apply a lot of his technical expertise in a mission space like our healthcare, public health sector. So, Eric, what do you love about working at the NCI? What really drew you not only to NIH, but what you're doing now and you're so excited about? And you talk about that constant state of curiosity and learning. What is it that really gets you up and motivated every day?
Well, I think working at the National Cancer Institute, it's a great opportunity to see where, as a public servant, you can get involved and help people worldwide that are battling cancer in so many different ways. And speaking to the technology piece, one of the things I love is that, around the ideas of digital transformation at NCI, what we do is we are guided by the scientific, the clinical, and the research community around our thinking when it comes to technology and what that digital transformation will look like. So versus the other way around. So we take a look at, what are the issues out there? What are the problems? And then we look at, okay, what might help us answer those hard questions or solve these hard scientific puzzles that we're trying to put together. And the richness of that community and the fact that it's worldwide is very exciting. So for somebody that wants to get in and learn, there's great opportunities there to learn from so many, crackerjack smart people at NCI.
Yeah, I'm gonna for our listeners, stop by cancer.gov. That simple. Check out not only a little bit of what we talked about in terms of background on the NCI, but opportunities to see how to partner with the NCI, the NIH. I just have a few items here that I think might be of interest in this town. Annual plans, budget proposals, a lot of the intramural and extramural research, funding opportunities, and so forth, and a mention of a lot of the key initiatives, of course, cancer, moonshot, and COVID-19. But for our techies out there, just to kind of underscore, Eric, your point, bioinformatics, big data, and cancer. I tend to think, coming from this, technology is never the problem. It supports the sectors we depend on in life, and how that will ultimately affect or impact society, humanity. It's the tech humanity culture component. You must feel that each and every day at NCI. I mean, I'm sure, stuff you don't like to see every day, but there's some things that maybe are exciting about, mitigating the spread of cancer. What's a typical good or bad day like, and what could you share that gives us hope for a future?
I would say, honestly, they're all great days because you get to interact, with such a great community and the patients that we serve. And we are led by very humble leaders that are really easy to work for and they make you want to work for. I think intellectually, it's also stimulating when you get to hear and learn about, kind of the advances in the next generation sequencing activities, whether it's with the exome technology or the whole genome sequencing, things like that, or you get to see and learn about cryo-electron microscopy and things like that are going on that, just for me, boggle my mind. And you see this high-end technology actually being applied day in and day out to solve these really hard problems. That's what's exciting to see. So, the possibilities are so big that, one never has the opportunity to run out of things that are of interest. So they're just there for the taking.
Yeah, that's a great point. And to again, maybe use the word again, underscore the federal government, maybe inside the Beltway, it's the largest employer. From what some statistic has told me, it makes sense. I grew up here myself, but you get outside the Beltway, it's always nice. And during some of the time we worked together at Energy, it was getting out to those national labs and really appreciating tech transfer, commercialization, R&D. And here you are in another location or job that you get to look at it not from that energy perspective, but where a lot of the R&D is happening.
One of the things, Pete, that I would add, and this is similar to energy, but at the National Cancer Institute, earlier there was a mention of intramural and extramural communities, and for those that might not be aware of kind of what that means, the intramural community at NIH is the research, the science that's being done at the National Cancer Institute itself. The extramural community is the research community that's being supported through grants from the NIH. So when you look at the overall NCI budget, the bulk of that goes out in the form of grants, whether it's to research institutions, universities, nonprofits, to help solve these hard problems. So we're partnering with many, many different actors to help solve these difficult scenarios.
Hey, that wasn't a setup either, because you went right where we're going to move into this collaboration component. But I want to again emphasize uh, right off the website, folks. So again, visit cancer.gov, NIH, read about that incredible place and what it's doing in terms of creating opportunities to collaborate. Uh, uh, the NCI is or in fiscal year 2020, the Department of Health and Human Services Appropriation Act and the 21st Century Cures Act allocated $6.44 billion, $297 million net increase over fiscal year 2019. I mean, that's exciting. And when people say, hey, the government's, not the easiest place to kind of navigate and work with, Eric, I mean, you just emphasize it. It's about pushing money out to collaborate and partner. And I being on the mission side, former technologist that you were, chief information security officer kind of guy, when you weren't just worried about keeping the lights on and protecting data, being in the mission side now, can we go back to just your job, your deputy executive officer? I'm sure people watching this are like, ooh, that's a guy I'd love to talk with. How engaging are you, or do you serve as a gateway to help industry understand how to partner, how to understand what you're doing to help maybe find a solution on the outside that could be a tool or an instrument? How much time do you spend working in that collaborative open government partnership role?
So this is a good amount. And I tell people kind of tongue in cheek when they ask, well, what does a deputy executive officer at the National Cancer Institute do? I tell them, my job is to reach out and establish relationships with people to figure out where might there be either issues or opportunities that they are facing, and help find a problem or help find a solution to the problem, or develop options for them. And so I think it's, maintaining your relationships with industry, growing that network, because you don't know where you're going to learn something that you'll find out tomorrow that, hey, there might be somebody in the research community that is looking, for a solution that somebody in industry might already have.
Yeah, I find that it's that constant ebb and flow of sometimes we have to develop, sometimes we have to buy. And being a bit of a gearhead technology guy myself, I find that there's probably something invented, but the hard part is in many cases, having that on ramp. So thank you for that. And again, if there's any ever an opportunity during our chat here to say, hey, here's a resource, here's a website, here's a situation for folks to take advantage of to do that collaborative partnering.
And I would add that, when you look at the National Cancer Institute, a lot of the things that we are doing today are, we're looking at those, refractory cancers, or, what is that, trying to find that next innovation or that next therapy, and taking and proving whether or not it's viable. So when you go to your community hospitals and you see what's standard of care there, it wasn't always standard of care. It was developed somewhere. So when you look at the basic science that's being done, or the clinical research being done with our research partners who are the patients at NIH, that is happening in Bethesda and with the partners that we have all over the country and all over the world. It's thanks to them that we're able to come up with these innovations and these breakthroughs that will one day become standard of care. So examples of that is when you see, therapeutics or vaccines introduced. An example is, the drug Synagis, right? That's given to boys and girls now. They get a couple of doses to help fight HPV, the human papillomavirus, so that to try and stem the development of cervical cancer, right? It's a huge breakthrough. Well, that was invented at the National Cancer Institute by some of our leaders there, and again, who are the most humble people in the world. And what they've done is change the world. That's just one example. There are other examples when you look at some of these refractory leukemias, things like that. That's being studied today. That down the road could be standard of care in a community hospital, helping one of your loved ones, should God forbid they develop that cancer.
Yeah, you're hitting on this. By the way, Eric and I chatted before and we were so saying, hey, we're going to stay off the technology side of things because it's not the problem. But here you are. You're bringing me into it, Eric. Hey, folks, cancer.gov, bioinformatics, big data, cancer. I'm literally looking at it right now, seeking answers from big data in the era of precision medicine, So those of you who I'd like to think, and Eric, tell me I'm right, wrong, or indifferent. If you're calling on the NIH and you're looking at one of those 27 institutes and or centers, know the mission, right? Know what you think your tool can do to support cancer research, being hearing impaired, infectious disease. NCI role in cancer bioinformatics is goes without saying how incredibly important it is. Democratizing big data for cancer research and protecting patient privacy. That to me covers the gamut of a lot of technology enabling a mission. So, Eric, that is to me a wonderful opportunity to partner with NCI, and thank you. And I think for those CIO type out there is a CIO, is there not, at the NIH, Eric?
We have an outstanding CIO named Jeff Schilling, who does a fantastic job, and he is 100% mission first. Just a great guy. I love interacting with him. One of the things that I would add about the National Institutes of Health is sometimes you hear about it on the nightly news, and you think NIH is just one entity. It's, as you said, Pete, it's 27 different institutes and centers, and the majority of those are disease specific. So you have the National Cancer Institute, you have the National Institute on Drug Abuse, you have the National Institute of Child Health and NICHD, Child Health Development. So there's many different organizations, if you will, these institutes and centers that are disease specific, and you can look those up and find out exactly what it is that they are researching and they're working on. And I think that will help people understand better kind of the research avenue that they're pursuing.
Yeah, no, that's again the Sherpa that you are. Folks, it's a team of about 3,500 at the NCI, and it is part of the NIH. And most importantly, and this is what I love to just tout, is it's the leader in cancer research enterprise, collectively known as the National Cancer Program, and the largest funder of cancer research in the world, right here in Bethesda, Maryland. So an amazing place with amazing people like you, Mr. Eric Cole. All right, buddy, I want to pivot a bit into something personal, but also amazing, and showcasing your thought leadership, your drive and passion. And that's the Dandy Walker Alliance, which you founded here in 2006. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, its mission? And again, buddy, from the heart, I know it's personal. So would love to have you share where it is and where it's going.
Yeah. So how it started is in 2005, my wife and I had a son, Ryan, who was born with this congenital brain malformation called Dandy Walker syndrome. And at that time, we went to see, what organizations were out there to be able to connect with other families, understand what research was going on. And make a long story short, we didn't find one. So in 2006, we started one, and we were able to connect with families from all over the world who were looking for the same sort of support, and had the same questions that we did. So that was very beneficial. But having stood up as a 501c3, we were able to receive donations. And in doing so, over the years, those grew and grew and grew to where we put together a scientific and medical advisory board, and then we're able to get in and start funding basic science ourselves. So we got involved in that because we wanted to see what could we do to help accelerate the understanding and the learning about this birth defect, to potentially help many people all over the world. And so we started working with the researchers to collect, blood and saliva samples. They were doing the collection. We were helping with the patient recruitment. They would be consented, go through an IRB approved protocol. They get the samples, isolate the DNA, and then we would do whole exome sequencing. So we would look at the genes that we know are involved in coding for proteins. And what our hope is to be able to identify a pattern when you analyze all of this data to see, okay, when we look at mom, dad, kid, we call them trios. When you look at those and you can look at what abnormalities genetically are inherited from mom or dad, you could say, okay, well, we know that that might not be involved. That just, and it might not even be expressed
Mm.
in the phenotype, right? You might just see it genetically, the genotype. But when you kind of set those aside and you're left with a subset of genetic variants in the child after you remove mom and dad's genetic variants that the kid would inherit, and then you go and you do the next trio and you sequence them, you start lining them up. What our hope was is that we would be able to identify some common genes to say, aha, now we've got more of these basic targets, we call them, involved with the birth defect. Well, we started there because it's a lot less data to look at than it is to look at the whole genome. Well, we didn't find as many basic targets as we want. So then we had to pivot, if you will, and say, okay, now let's go back and work with the researchers and see how much material is left to where we can extract the DNA and then do the whole genome sequencing. And that's what we're doing now. So there's gonna be terabytes and terabytes of data. And so we work with bioinformaticists to go through there to, again, look at these trios, line them up, see where their variants are. But in parallel to that, we have another project where we are using machine learning and training algorithms with the hope of being able to identify these variants with a high degree of certainty a little faster. And then we can use the bioinformaticists to take and validate that, yep, what the machine saw is in fact true. And if we can get to where we can train an algorithm good enough, and as the price of the sequencing comes down, we can do many more of these samples. And, we can hopefully, once we identify all the genes that are involved in this birth defect, we can start to look at, okay, are there ways that we can intervene, hopefully non-invasively, to take and either reduce some of the effects or, ideally find a cure one day for it. So there are other models out in the rare disease community that are taking this same approach. And there are some breakthroughs that you can read about in diagnosis like cystic fibrosis, who's using the CRISPR-Cas9 technology to go in and modify genes that otherwise, has an effect on individuals with cystic fibrosis. So, these are interventions that are helping people live longer lives. And now, so that's where we're headed. Now, there's obviously many steps involved along the way, looking at animal models and things like that. So that's the path we're headed down right now. And again, we will revector as we learn things. And the goal out of all this is to publish, let the world know what we learn, so people can learn directly or indirectly from this, because there are other researchers around the world that are looking at these hindbrain malformations that may be related. So it's an exciting time. The other thing that's exciting about it is when you do this basic science, especially at the genetic level, is you never know what you're going to stumble upon. So while we are looking from the perspective of trying to find genes involved with Dandy Walker as the diagnosis, you could stumble on these other variants. And again, by publishing, the community that's out there that might be interested in a specific gene, if they learn more about it, well, you might be able to help another rare disease or other population. And that's the beauty of it all. The research that they're doing might benefit us one day.
Eric, this is to me the power of collaboration, but with a purpose, a greater good. I always think of you and others that I've been, fortunate to know that when, Ryan, who, by the way, love the photos, he looks amazing. And I've seen him grow up too. It's a miracle. And I think that your leadership in the Dandy Walker Alliance as a project, but also, you were hitting on a lot of, it sounds like, and here's the question, technology is in a sense helping you maybe put two and two together and say, oh my gosh, look what we learned. You've mentioned, bioinformatics sounds technical, but it's like, obviously with all this machine learning and cloud computing and opportunity and resources and people contributing, where's your meter on, are lives being extended as a result of the work that you're leading and with your team through Dandy Walker? Is there a lot of hope on the horizon?
Well, I think there's a lot of hope on the horizon. We don't have any sort of therapeutics or other interventions at this point. What I can say is, and this kind of does go back to the digital transformation, where everyone now is kind of given a voice, especially through social media, is how we're pursuing a research agenda. We now are able to connect, with these families all over the globe. And so I recall a few years ago that we were contacted by a family who had a daughter that was newborn, diagnosed, shortly after birth with Dandy Walker syndrome. They lived in Lahore, Pakistan.
Ooh.
In 2 hours, we were able to connect them with 2 other families in Lahore, Pakistan, raising kids with Dandy Walker, so they could exchange information on, what specialists they were using, what
Wow.
therapies they were, benefiting from, and things like that, to see if it would be right for their daughter. So, that's one of the powers that we've got through, this interconnected world that we have right now. So that's the upside of it. I think, one of the things that we also have to be careful of in this interconnected world is the potential for its misuse. So, we can see that not only the social media side, where there's issues with privacy, transparency, accountability, things like that would give us pause and are giving us pause. But you also have, other actors that you can see when you talk about the high-end computing, and we're doing genetic work and things like that, where if we don't have safeguards to check sort of the sequence that we're expecting in some of this, these genetic reads that we will get, it's possible where that could be exploited with, certain attacks and things like that, where, what you think that you're getting is not actually what it is, if somebody intervenes and manipulates that data. So I think from a cyber perspective, we have a ways to go in mitigating some of those risks.
Well, again, he keeps bringing in his own cyber security / data privacy side. I know it's in there. It's in your DNA, my friend. And Eric, we're going to move on to some of sort of being a dad and humanizing a bit of how analytics is helping you in the baseball realm. I just want to give a shout out, though. You use some incredibly powerful acronyms, or should I say spelled out those acronyms. The NCI Center for Biomedical Informatics and Information Technology, yes, that's a mouthful. CBIIT oversees the Institute's bioinformatics related initiatives. Google it, check it out, cancer.gov.
Led by an outstanding guy named Dr. Anthony Karlovich. I mean, he is a prince of a man.
Okay, there you go, folks. Dr. Anthony. I also just wanted to mention, since you brought up the research, that the Cancer Data Science Laboratory, CDSL, the NCI Center for Cancer Research, again, another opportunity. Who knows, if you're out there, you have a technology solution that's machine learning, that's AI, whatever, engage, folks. The information that I'm speaking to is publicly available, and you're hearing it from the source in Mr. Eric Cole. And I'm not going to give out his email or his phone number. That's on him. But I'm sure, just knowing him, if you drop him a note, he's someone that will get back to you. I got to ask you, I mean, I would love to say that I'm board certified in something someday. What is that all about? Healthcare management as an American College of Healthcare Executive Fellow. What do you do in that role, Eric?
So before I came to the National Cancer Institute, I was working in NIH's hospital, the NIH Clinical Center, and I was there for 7 years. And one of the things in sort of hospitals across the country and in other countries to some extent is on the administration side of things. There's a Board of Governors exam. So many times when you go and you see a physician or another licensed independent practitioner, they take board exams, right? They kind of certifies that they have met a certain standard in their field. Well, there's a similar standard for hospital administrators, and the American College of Healthcare Executives is sort of the gold star in determining kind of who meets that bar. So there's stringent requirements that have to be met, not only from an education perspective, but how long do you need to be involved in the organization and active. There's continuing education requirements, and then there's a Board of Governors exam that one must pass to be able to be recognized as a fellow in the American College of Healthcare Executives. So it covers 12 different domains. So there's an IT domain, but there are many others as well, so that you kind of understand the operations and all that it takes to run a hospital.
Wow.
So that's where that board certification came in.
Okay, so thank you for that. And again, you just triggered another thought. So in the spirit of just organic stream of consciousness, we're dealing with COVID-19. We're dealing with communications, which, again, it's so great to see you, literally. I wish I could be hanging out with you in person doing this with some mics in our hands or in front of us. How is that affecting you? I mean, the campus, are you considered one of those essentials, or how is communication being leveraged to keep the business of NCI and research going? Is virtual communications a thing? Are you spending a lot of time in the office, or can you just share that insight, if you will, of?
I mean, so I haven't been in the office since March when this pandemic started. So, but what we've seen is that the business practices have, changed dramatically and transformed through all the digital tools, and many of which we had before the pandemic. We just weren't using them as effectively as we are
I hear
now.
that a lot.
So
Yep.
this has kind of forced us to evolve into that role. So, at the National Cancer Institute, there are certain things that you can't do remotely. You can't do the bench science in the laboratory at home, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are certain functions that need to be performed. You can't see patients from home. So, they're in the hospital, cancer patients need treatment, they need to be seen. Our doctors and nurses, they're there supporting them around the clock, day in and day out, making sure that they get what they need. So that need has always been met, and the critical research continues. We also continue to support, what we said earlier was the extramural community, that grants community outside of Bethesda, Maryland, to make sure that they're getting the support that they need, especially during this time.
Yeah, that to me just takes this, what we see on the news every night about frontline workers, and it's like the firemen and the police and our military, and the folks who support our power grid. I mean, we got people every day doing what they do, and I don't think we hear enough of that. But thanks for sharing that optic, because even for me, I drive by that NIH and I just am like, thank God we have people like yourself, Eric, going to work every day doing what you do. Okay, buddy. Just because my two boys are big baseball players, meaning that their age is 14 and 13, analytics in baseball, it's a thing. We know that it's kind of taken over the game. What's that all about? Wearing your dad hat, and how'd you get involved with that? And how are this analytics thing does speak to me like not somebody who's a GM of a club saying this is how we pick our players. It's impacting at these lower levels, huh? Of the kids at their age group.
Yeah. So, I think for me, it kind of starts by being a math geek.
Okay. Math geek. Do you hear that, folks? He's also a math geek. Go ahead, Eric.
So it's always my favorite subject. And so my son, Ryan, who we were talking about earlier, we had him on a team, a little league team. And one of the things that he found out is that, and the coaches allowed him to do, is he wanted to keep the lineup for the team versus being at bat or being in the field. Mm-hmm. And the coaches allowed him to do that and included him. And so the coaches would tell the other boys, when they want to know, when am I going to hit, coach? They would say, well, you go ask Ryan. Ryan will tell you. And they made him kind of the dugout manager. Well, along the way, in addition to keeping the lineup and learning the lingo, you're at the plate, you're on deck, you're in the hole. He started to wonder, well, what are all these other boxes on this spiral notebook to the right? The diamonds and all of this. And so, I started working with him and taught him how to score a game. And he can legitimately now score a game. That's awesome. And the day that it got so exciting for me is when we were watching a game together, and he's scoring it, as we're watching it on TV, every pitch, he'll track every pitch. And he saw a team that had the shift on, and he turns to me and asked, Dad, why doesn't the batter just bunt? Well, that's how you beat the shift, right? I mean, yes. So that's what I knew. It was all coming together. And I was like, exactly, son. And, but how do you get to how do you know when to shift? Well, you track the data, right? If you know what pitch is coming in and the batter's history, kind of, well, what do they do against this pitch or that pitch? You kind of know where to put the players. So
that is such a cool story that it kind of got me all like happy and excited, I would imagine, as a dad. But for Ryan, that's huge. I might have to have, I think I know what I'm looking at when I'm watching my Phillies, but at the end of the day, that would be cool to have Ryan giving me a little like, here's what you should expect, Mr. T. Hey, Eric. All right. We're coming to a little bit of we're coming to the close here. And I mentioned that I always like to prep my guests that there's going to be a parting shot moment. And that's something I'd like you, in light of this conversation, not scripted, whatever you want to say. It could be a simple, hey, thanks, Pete. But But something you want to leave with the audience. We covered technology, we covered cancer, we covered research, we covered tech transfer in your work. And so, if you could think of something that you can shout out to those watching, and we have a pretty wide audience, education, information, and enlightenment is really what you wanted to get at. And you did that amazingly well. You articulated it as you always do. But before I give you my final thank you, you're an amazing person, Eric. You're a thought leader. You're a change agent. We talked about the greater good, and just hearing your story and little things that I didn't know about. I want to thank you for that, and for sharing, and for humanizing you, the federal government, and where you work. So with that, giving you some time as I suck some air out of here, the call, what is your parting shot, based on what we talked about today?
What I would say is, whatever you're doing, it's all about relationships. And I think if you approach them from a giving perspective and, how can I help somebody else, what you'll find is many people will reciprocate. And, nobody gets to where they are without a help from a lot of other people. And I think when you're honest, you're genuine, and you're doing things from a giving perspective, you will develop those genuine relationships, and those will create opportunities for you to learn. And when those opportunities come together, that's where you will see things that you can take, again, from one sphere of your life to another and apply them and move things forward. And those connections are really invaluable. So, when people, think about sort of the currency of business, if you will, it's really the relationships. I mean, it's so much easier when you have those connections. And, I can go to you, Pete, and say, look, this is a challenge I'm facing or whatnot. And you can help me think through that, and I can be vulnerable with you and say, well, maybe here's a different way to think about it, or a different way to try it. Or maybe there's a new opportunity that I didn't see. When you have those relationships, people will offer those up with you. If you don't make an effort to go out and develop those, to not only just grow your network, but you got to maintain it as well, because it will grow dormant if you don't, keep those connections up. I think when you do that, you not only help yourself, you set yourself up to continue learning, but you also set yourself up to be able to use the power of that network to identify solutions that you could come back to help your organization move forward.
Well, I mean, that was much. That if tweets can be that long, that would be one hell of a tweet, my friend. No, Eric, like I said, we need more Eric Coles in this world. Your human spirit that you shared, your humility and your authenticity are just, it oozes. So thank you for serving our country at the NIH, at the NCI. We will talk again. I want to thank you again for the insights and just for being open and honest, and keep doing what you do, my friend.
Thank you, Pete. It's great to see you.
You got it, brother.